My name is Peter Hodges. Our family own the Glen Oak property which is behind us. We've owned this property since the early 70s, and we run it as in conjunction with our Riversdale property at Scone. We're deeply involved in the horse industry and also some cattle fattening. The location that I'm speaking from, directly behind me, is the Middlebrook Road, which leads up to the Tuwari National Park, and to my left is the Crestfield Road, which takes anybody wishing to travel this way out to the highway. The purpose of making this tape is to highlight the problems with the Middlebrook Road, which is a main haulage road for Cliffords Quarry, and covering that particular development are the conditions of consent, and we wish to highlight the non-compliance of those conditions of consent through this small film. Okay, there are a couple of aspects to those conditions of consent that we have problems with. One is the way that the proponent, the quarry operators, leave the condition of the road, the sides of the road, in terms of us being able to maintain it and look after our fences. And the other is the material that they actually use on the road and how it seems to be fairly useless. By way of example, you can see a couple of guideposts here. This is an earlier guidepost that's been knocked out by the grader. This is a council guidepost that's been put in at some stage. It's been knocked out by the grader. Some time ago they decided they wanted some material and rather import the material from a reasonable source. They decided they'd have a dig beside the road in the table drain here and dug a hole, decided it wasn't any good, and then unloaded it here. And in the past we were able to slash down the sides of the road, but that's become impossible now because of the behaviour with these fellows. Their condition of consent is that they're supposed to batter the sides of the road and leave it in a reasonable condition, similar to what the council does on its roads that it's responsible for. Not only that, they have moved the alignment of the road more towards my fence, in fact to the point where they're actually up against the fence. We used to be able to ride a horse down alongside this fence years ago, but it's now impacted by them moving the material gradually to the fence and through the fence. The fence is almost half buried by their material. Again, we can't maintain the fence and it becomes impossible to service it, and it's a breach. It's not in the spirit of the conditions of consent that the Land Environment Court imposed on this development. Oh, okay.
If you get behind me and I'll turn around, you can make a comment. Okay.
Right. Again, we've been here, I'd say, probably about 10 minutes, and we've just in that space of time we've had 3 truck movements, and as any observer can see, there's a distinct lack of any attempt to do dust suppression. And today is a lovely day. There's no wind, it's not really hot yet. One can only imagine what it's like when it's 35 to 40 degrees and these guys are running at the rate that they were running on some film that you'll see later on this video clip. Now, what I'd like to point out here is another example of their poor workmanship in terms of road maintenance. On the other side of the road, in years gone by, before these fellows got control of the road was actually roughly the same height as my property. And instead of keeping the road formed and in the middle with the proper material, with the crown top to facilitate long-term use, they've just let the road drift over this way, where it's now packed up onto my fence. The fence is actually holding back about half a metre of hard rock. The hard rock is actually spewing through the fence each time they grade it, and with traffic movements and soil wash. And this is an alluvial flat, and this is the hard rock that's coming through the fence onto my property. Now, this is one of the weaknesses of their management. This stuff is totally unsuitable for what they're trying to do. It should be, as I said before, a formed gravel road using a suitable compressed road base. This loose material is just dumped here, and it may help in some respects when it's initially put down for dust suppression, but it breaks up into a fine powder. And of course, when we get water off the side of the road, we do get big storms here, it just goes straight into the paddock, and it's a total waste of time. But this is what they've done to the road. Just as an example, this just demonstrates that the road should be back here. This is where it used to be. It's gradually been walked out by their grader driver. If it was back here about another 1.5 metres or 2 metres, then there'd be clearance from the fence. Again, it just highlights the lack of management. This is another bone of contention. This is our access onto this old house site block. There used to be a home here years ago. We could drive in here with a car, either to go to the site or to go down across the creek. There's a canch left up here by the grader. It's probably, well, it's inaccessible to a car, but it's just a mess anyway. And this gives you an idea of what's turning up on the road. It's totally unsuitable for a road base, and sooner or later, you know, this sort of stuff should be crushed down into the road, but they don't do that. And sooner or later it ends up in my paddocks and likely to get amongst machinery and that. Further behind me, again, further examples of rock and rubbish pushed up higgledy-piggledy. More example of the road. You know, 3 years ago I came along here with a slasher and cleaned all this up. But with that sort of stuff floating around, it's impossible. It's hard on your machinery, and also it's a liability in terms of putting a rock through somebody's windscreen. Again, the same. This is pretty well indicative of what's going on. Scraped off the road, just piled up where it's totally unmanageable. Unmanageable from a presentation point of view, because we take pride in our property, and unmanageable in terms of keeping weeds down, because if you can keep your place slashed and mown, you don't have near the problems with weeds as if it's left in an unmanageable state like that. This is another example. This is all stuff that's been actually pushed off the road. This was a slope back up here that I could get the tractor and slasher up alongside, and it's just all piled up with rock and road waste and all the rest of it, and I think it's unacceptable. But just give an idea.
It's coming back the other way today.
Yeah. Yeah, this is our house site. been going on all day. Unfortunately the battery's flat on the time and date, but it's now about 2:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, October the 14th I think.
Catherine Holloway, the coordinator of the 1233 ABC Newcastle Music Awards, and they are your Year 6 finalists in the folk category. We'll find out what Jenny Bates is up to this afternoon. Jackson Vernon has the news headlines, so hello.
Good afternoon, Carol. Making ABC News this hour. 5 Sydney.
Looks like the word's got out. House site obliterated. This is it. This is the norm. Jeez, it's amazing. Get out of focus, mate. I can't see if it's the blue truck, but this is the guy that's usually in a hurry. Onto the brakes, big slide around the corner. Just like shooting fish in a barrel.